Have you ever woken up with the strange feeling that nothing makes sense? I'm not talking about a bad day or a passing problem. I'm talking about that emptiness that hits all at once, like a silence that sweeps everything away. You can have a job, family, friends. You can smile in photos and pretend everything is fine, and still feel deep inside that life is just a repeated cycle leading nowhere. Sound familiar? That stab no one confesses, that secret we hide under layers of distractions because facing it is terrifying. It happened to Leo Tolstoy, one of the most admired men of his time. He had success, money, prestige, recognition, and yet he found himself trapped in a darkness that made him question everything. It wasn't ordinary depression, it wasn't bad mood, it was the most radical doubt a human being can suffer. Why live if one day we lose everything? The striking thing is that this question is not exclusive to geniuses or writers. It's inside all of us, even if we don't say it out loud. It appears when the noise stops, when the phone stops ringing, when the house goes silent. That's when the mind, like a knife, cuts mercilessly. What's the point of all this? And here's what very few dare to accept. Reason alone never fills. Logical explanations are flawless, but they leave a burning hole. You can solve 1,000 problems with your head, but if your heart stays empty, life turns into a barren field. That's what Tolstoy discovered firsthand, and that's the same crossroads we all approach, sooner or later. But you're not here just to stay with the wound open. Because if you keep listening, if you stay until the end, you're going to understand the same secret that saved Tolstoy from his own abyss. I promise you, by the end of this journey, you'll have in your hands a brutal and clear answer to that question you're so afraid to ask. The question beating silently inside you. What is the true meaning of life? Tolstoy discovered something almost no one dares to look at head on. The greatest enemy is not death, nor physical pain, nor even failure. The true enemy is the sense of emptiness, that nothingness that installs itself inside and turns any triumph into dust. Because what's the point of accumulating victories if in the end they're all devoured by the same question? That's the trap dragging millions, running without knowing where, working without understanding why, loving without asking why. It's as if life itself were a theater in which we act for an invisible audience that never applauds. And here comes the unsettling part. The more intelligent you are, the more you analyze, the bigger the crack becomes. Reason is like a spotlight that illuminates the room. Yes, you see clearly, but the brighter the light, the more shadows you discover in the corners. That happened to Tolstoy, and it happens to so many who consider themselves rational. We believe logic will give us peace, but all it does is remind us that no matter how much you explain existence, you can't turn that explanation into food for the soul. The mind wants certainty, the heart asks for meaning, and when they don't match, inner chaos is born. Tolstoy observed simple people, peasants, workers, men and women who didn't have his privileges, and instead of seeing them as victims of ignorance, what he discovered shook him. These people seemed to live with a purpose that he, with all his knowledge, couldn't sustain. They didn't need to prove anything. They didn't crave recognition. They lived with a serenity that defied any rational explanation. How is it possible, he asked, that someone with so little can live with such peace, while I, with everything I dreamed of, am devoured by despair? That contrast is brutal, and maybe you feel it too right now. Look around you. There are people with fewer opportunities than you, fewer resources, fewer titles, and yet they radiate a calm that slips through your fingers. Why? Because they're not trapped in the obsession of explaining everything. They don't need to justify each step with arguments. They simply walk, trust, love, serve. And that simply is precisely what makes them free. What Tolstoy understood is that the greatest mistake of modern humans isn't failing, but revolving their whole life around themselves. We live with the ego at the center, as if the entire universe existed to confirm we matter. But the more you feed that ego, the hungrier it gets. And it's never satisfied. It's a bottomless pit. And that pit is what devoured Tolstoy. Until he understood that true meaning isn't in looking inward to accumulate answers, but in opening yourself to something greater that transcends the individual. Think about it. When was the last time you felt what you were doing wasn't just for you? When was the last time your life had a purpose beyond your name, your face, your story? The paradox is cruel. When we're obsessed with being remembered, we end up being forgotten faster. On the other hand, when we act to serve something greater, even without applause, our life fills with a real weight, with a meaning that can't be stolen. Tolstoy didn't find the way out in books or theories. He found it by looking at the lives of those who seemed to have less, but were richer in essence. He discovered that meaning is embodied, not reasoned. That true freedom appears when you stop living to aggrandize yourself and start living for something that remains even when you're gone. And here's where everything becomes uncomfortable, because this idea hits directly at the wound of our time. We've turned life into a showcase where everything revolves around what we project, the image we give, the recognition we seek. But what happens when the lights go out? When the applause disappears? The same thing that happened to Tolstoy. You're left alone with the echo of a question burning stronger than ever. And the most disturbing thing is that this question always catches up to you. You can run, you can distract yourself, you can cover it with noise, but one day, when you're alone with yourself, you'll hear it. No one escapes it. The difference is in how you respond. Tolstoy at first believed there was no answer, and that's when many break, because they think if reason isn't enough, then there's no way out. But that's the mistake. The way out isn't in intellect, but in the way you live. Life isn't to be solved like a math puzzle. It's to be embodied as an act of faith, humility, surrender. Life, Tolstoy understood, isn't a problem to solve, but a mystery to inhabit. And when you accept that, something changes inside. The fear of nothingness loses power because you stop revolving around yourself. And here's the most revolutionary thing. The emptiness isn't filled with answers. It's filled with direction. When you know where you're going and why you're doing it, even in silence, even if no one celebrates it, each day stops being a burden and becomes a step with its own weight. So ask yourself, what is there in your life right now that transcends the individual? What are you doing today that would have value even if no one saw it, even if no one applauded? Because that's the compass that takes you out of the void. That's what saved Tolstoy. And that can be your way out too. Tolstoy discovered that the greatest pain of the human being isn't the absence of answers, but the illusion of believing you'll have them one day. That endless waiting, that idea that in the future there'll be a revelation clarifying everything, is what keeps us trapped. And the curious thing is we're not born with that obsession. As children, we play, explore, live without constantly asking why. The meaning was in the experience itself. But the more we grow, the more we poison ourselves with the need to explain everything, to control every detail, to have a perfect map of what it means to be alive. That thirst for certainty is what turned Tolstoy into a prisoner of his own mind. And here arises a disturbing idea. What if the real problem isn't not knowing the meaning of life, but demanding that there be a logical, clear, definitive explanation? Humans seek answers like someone seeking a drug. We want guarantees. We want the assurance that nothing is in vain. But that search, when it becomes obsession, ends up being more destructive than the void itself. Tolstoy lived it in his own flesh. The more he sought with reason, the farther he got from peace. It was like trying to put out a fire by pouring gasoline on it. The fascinating thing is that he discovered something modern psychology is only beginning to accept. Not every question is made to be solved. Some exist to transform us in the process of living them. The meaning of life isn't a phrase someone can hand you on a piece of paper. It's a daily practice, a way of inhabiting the world. And the sooner you understand it, the sooner you stop wearing yourself out in a dead-end alley. Tolstoy, in his desperation, faced dark thoughts. Even the idea that the best thing would be to end it all. That was the most dangerous point of his crisis. But right there, at that terrifying edge, he discovered a crucial nuance. If life were only a heap of cold reasoning, it would end up unbearable. Logic, naked, drags you to the abyss. But if you look beyond yourself, if you stop obsessing over your ego and put it at the service of something greater, suddenly a different horizon appears. What changes isn't the question. What changes is the direction of your gaze. And here's where we must pause, because you may think, all right, Tolstoy found a way out, but I'm not Tolstoy. And it's true, you're not him. But the wound that tore him apart is the same many feel today in silence. And the most unsettling thing is we live in an era designed to deepen that wound. Never before in history have people been so exposed to comparing themselves with others, to measuring their worth based on what others appear to have. Social networks, metrics, numbers promising meaning, and only delivering anxiety. It's the same poison consuming Tolstoy, but now in massive daily doses. Think about it. How many times have you felt your life doesn't have enough value because others seem happier, more successful, more complete? That's the exact mechanism Tolstoy identified. The idea that meaning lies outside, in what you achieve, in what you accumulate, in what others recognize. But that's a trap. Meaning is never in the gaze of others. It's always found in the way you choose to live the invisible, what no one sees. And that's the great paradox. What matters most is almost never displayed. Here's where the topic gets even deeper. Because existential emptiness isn't solved by adding more achievements, more goals, more stimuli. On the contrary, it intensifies. It's like drinking salt water. The more you consume, the thirstier you get. What truly heals is learning to inhabit silence, to discover a purpose in the everyday, in what doesn't seek approval. Tolstoy understood this when he realized simple people found joy in tiny acts, sowing the land, caring for their children, praying before sleeping. None of that made headlines. None of that remained for posterity. But each act was charged with a meaning that he, in his grandiose search, had lost. That's the uncomfortable lesson no one wants to hear. You don't need to conquer the world to feel your life matters. What you need is to stop seeing yourself as the center of the universe. The ego asks for greatness, but the soul asks for direction. And direction isn't dictated by recognition, it's dictated by service. What do you serve with what you do? What remains when the noise disappears? If you can't answer that, everything else turns to smoke. That's why existential emptiness isn't a sign that life lacks meaning, but a symptom that you're living it, turned away from it. It's a brutal warning, an alarm screaming, you've focused on yourself too long. And though it hurts, that alarm is an opportunity. Because the moment you decide to turn towards something greater, that suffocating feeling starts to transform into direction. Darkness becomes a compass. And the curious thing is that change doesn't require you to understand everything, only to live differently. So just like Tolstoy, you too have a choice before you. You can keep chasing explanations that will never quench your thirst, or you can start living with a purpose that doesn't depend on you. The first option will lead you to emptiness, the second to peace. The question is, how much longer will you wait to choose? And now we reach the point where Tolstoy's wound becomes a mirror for all of us. Because what terrifies us most isn't death, but the possibility of living without meaning. And that's exactly what he understood at the edge of the abyss. The real hell isn't ceasing to exist. The real hell is existing without purpose. That's why his awakening was so radical. He didn't need more riches, nor more applause, nor more titles. What he needed was a north that didn't depend on his ego. He discovered that when your life stops revolving around you, the emptiness loses strength. Meaning isn't found in explanations, it reveals itself in the way you live, and how each act leaves a mark beyond your name. And here's the unsettling thing. You too can fall into the same trap that caught him, but you can also get out. The decision lies in how you look at the world. If you choose to live as a satellite of yourself, you'll end up consumed by your own orbit. But if you choose to give yourself to something greater, even if it has no name, even if no one applauds, each day becomes different. Because the secret isn't answering the question of meaning. The secret is embodying it. The most disturbing part of all is that this way out is within everyone's reach. You don't have to be a genius or a philosopher or an immortal writer. All you need is the courage to stop putting yourself at the center. It sounds simple, but it's the hardest decision of all. And here I want to throw you a challenge. Think of something in your life you could live more transcendently. Something that's not about you, but about what you leave in others. That answer, if you find it, will be more valuable than any theory. Now, if you've made it this far, it means this topic also burns inside you. So I invite you not to stay silent. Leave in the comments a sentence that sums up what you feel after hearing this. It doesn't matter if it's long or short. What matters is that it's yours, that it comes from you. And if this journey stirred you, subscribe, because here you're not going to find empty entertainment. Here you'll find questions that break you inside, but also clues to rebuild yourself stronger. And I'm going to say goodbye in a different way, without repeated formulas or empty phrases. Imagine this video doesn't end here. Imagine that now you turn off the screen, look around you, and the echo of everything you've just heard stays with you. not as another speech, but as a voice that accompanies you in silence, that whispers each time you fall into routine. Life isn't explained, it's lived. If tomorrow you remember one single thing from all you've heard today, let it be that. And if you forget it, at least remember the discomfort it left you, because that discomfort is the beginning of your transformation. See you in the next video, or maybe not. Because if you really understood what we just talked about, then you no longer need me.